We're streaming live. We're good. Hi everyone. Thank you for coming in. Uh, it's a nice sunny Saturday afternoon after quite some time. We've had a couple of rains. I don't know how much water it shed over all of your plants. They don't mind for sure. But a big thank you to all of you guys in person who are attending today on this Saturday afternoon, and a big hello to all the ones who are joining us online. We are streaming this event also on YouTube, so it's a hybrid event, obviously. So I think it's officially time for me to introduce myself and tell you guys what we're doing here today. So my name is Digvijay, and I will be your host for this evening. And I want to welcome all of you online and in person to our second design meetup here at DTS. The first one we did was online. That was back in January, and we thought that hey, if people are open to coming in person, then why should we do that instead? And obviously, we wanted to cater to all the folks that follow us all around the globe as well. So, hybrid. It's a very extensive setup. I've already fought with my team thrice today to understanding how this thing works. I just left it up to them. I still don't understand how it's working right now. But again, welcome. So let me take a moment to tell you folks a little bit about what we do here with design at KTS. Obviously, we call ourselves a product studio, and we do that because we have this extensive design studio that we house, which we use for a lot of research, a lot of projects that we do in house. We use it for our clients. We use it just to create fun things and show it to people and all that. Uh, Right now, we are extensively experimenting with design systems. We started off a couple of months back, and we managed to very quickly design an entire design system for native base, which is one of our open source products, uh, which is completely based on has its own design system now that's established. And the guys folks at native base are actually having a hackathon right now as we speak back in Whitefield. So if any one of you guys after this event is done have any strength left in you, you can travel all the way back to Whitefield just to see what that looks like. That's at the iNeuron office. So check that out if you want. I would force you. Uh, so we are building design system not for just our products in house. We are building design system for a lot of our clients as well. Uh, we have worked with some notable names in the industry. A lot of them are under NDA, so I really wanted to say those names out loud, but I cannot think I can get the company soon, and I don't want to do that. But Pepperfry is one of them. Those guys gave us permission, so thank you, Pepperfry. This one's for you. Uh, we also focus on a lot of atomic design methodologies, on quite a lot of atomic design methodologies, because during our research and everything that we have done, we found out that it's one of the most efficient ways to get to the end result that you're trying to get to when building design systems. Uh, and obviously, I think it's very clear that the things that I've told you that research is at the heart of what we do. We keep researching, we keep trying out new design trends that are out there in the market to see how viable they are in the market today, how people are responding to them. We build a lot of apps around it. Keep doing that zero and one, keep testing things around. So that is what we do right here at PKS in terms of design. Uh, with that, I'll just walk you quickly through the agenda for today. So obviously, you'll be hearing from Aditya, who's a design lead at Frontpole. We're talking about setting up better systems for design teams, which I think will be very useful for a lot of folks present at this meetup today, in person and of course online. Uh, Next, you'll be hearing from Tanisha. Tanisha will be talking about the myths that surround design systems and what's true and what's not. And it's a lot of clarity that we get from there. And finally, we'll be hearing from Akash, who will be joining us online through the hybrid setup. And he will be talking about how you can validate your ideas using something called a confidence test. Post that, uh, with a quick switch in the agenda that we originally had for today, uh, we'll be hosting a small quiz for you guys, and we have prizes to give away. So make sure you're around to participate from that. And then finally, we will have an extensive panel discussion, and we will be joined by obviously two of our speakers, Akash, who will be joining us online, Aditya, Arun, and of course the design head here at DTN's Meetup, she's also in attendance. So that's what we're doing today. This is what you can expect out of this meetup, out of spending the next 2.5, 3 hours with us. Uh, Obviously, there are certain codes of conduct that we need to maintain. So, to manage, please silence your phones because A lot of times it's happened that phones ring in between talks. Interruptions are not good. Nobody likes them. So please make an effort and silence your phones while you're at it. Refrain from using hate speech, racism, inappropriate comments. This doesn't need to be spelled out. We're trying to maintain a very healthy environment here. So we please help us maintain that. Be friendly, be nice, help each other grow, learn from each other, and most importantly, network, because that's what we are here for. Get to know about each other, make connections, because that's how we move forward, right? Now, for all the folks joining us online, uh, we are sad that you couldn't be here in person with us. We really hope that you could. But if you do like what's happening here and if you're learning a lot, do tweet about us. Let the world know what we're doing here. Use the hashtag DesignBLR that's on the screen right now, and let everybody know. And if you can get more people to jump in, we don't mind. So that's it, folks. That's everything that we are doing here today. This is the only thing that you'll hear from me from now, but of course, I'll see you again throughout the event. So I encourage you all to, of course, enjoy the show. And it's time for me to introduce our very first speaker on stage. Aditya has been practicing design for 3 years now, and he's the design lead at Front Row. And he's worked in a lot of different capacities as well. So that gives him this plethora of knowledge as to how you can grow as a designer in the industry as well, and then establish yourself within the market. But more than that, of course, he's a cyclist. I hope you did not cycle your way here. Okay, you could find a cab. Thank you, Uber. Thank you, Uber. So, with that, Aditya, why don't you take the stage? A big round of applause for Aditya, please.
Waiting for it to show up here. Yeah, great. So, hello everyone. Yeah. Hello everyone. First of all, thank you so much for coming here, and I'd like to thank Geeky Ants for organizing this wonderful meetup. It's been a while since we physically met, and the 2 years of COVID made it very difficult to do so. So I'm very glad that all of you have taken time out on a Saturday evening, Saturday afternoon as of now. And that goes on to show how enthusiastic you're all about design. So we'll just start off right away. So I'd like to introduce myself first. Of course, thanks to Digvijay, he did a great job. But apart from that, I currently am a UX design lead at Front Row. I lead a small team of designers here. And at Front Row, what we're trying to do is we are trying to build this platform which helps people pursue their passion. Before this, interestingly, I was one of those engineers turned designers. So I was actually having a full-time job. I used to work as a backend engineer in American Express, and then I made a switch when I realized that design was my true calling. Now, having said that, I love to talk about myself beyond my work, of course. So the four photos which describe me are these. So you can find me on weekends cycling with a bunch of camera gear on my backpack, taking occasional pauses to pet dogs in various neighborhoods, or playing football, if I'm not procrastinating, that is. So having said that, we'll jump right into it. We'll talk about design systems. Will not. We will not talk about design systems. Tanisha will talk about design systems after this. We will actually talk about great systems for design teams. Now, I know this sounds a little confusing. This might not be very descriptive. So, I will go on to explain what it means and how we came to this particular topic. So, this whole talk is going to be more of a conversation between you and I, where I'll tell you more about my journey as a designer in the last couple of years that I've come to design industry as a developer first, and what were my learnings in this past 2 years. I like to share all of my wins, what I learned, all my failures as well, and hopefully I can make an interesting conversation when you can have some good takeaways for your design teams that you're building. So before we start, I want to give a quick disclaimer, which is that if you talk about this particular topic, it's going to be more applicable if you're working in a startup rather than a big or a mid-sized company. If you already work at a mid-sized company where you have a mature design team, a lot of the practices or ideas we're going to talk about, you might know few of them. However, if you're at a startup where you're building a new team by yourself, then this topic is going to be right for you. So I'd like to talk about how we came to this idea of this topic, right? About building better systems for design teams. So this all started with a conversation that I had with my manager more than a year ago. It was one of my earlier one-on-ones, and I was at a point where I was starting to realize that I'm reaching a stage in my career where I am trying to contribute more, and my learning is slightly diminishing. And this is a point that a lot of you would reach multiple times in your career. And the obvious answer to such a question is usually a switch. You switch to a bigger team where there are bigger challenges, there's a better team, more higher scale for you to work at. But a rather unconventional choice in the certain same case is also to take the challenge of building the team that you actually want to work for in your very own organization. And at that point, I was very confused. That seemed like a very unconventional idea to me. However, I did go ahead with the latter option, which was to build the kind of team that I wish to work for. And I couldn't have been more proud. So, having said that, I'll move on to our first main topic, so to say, which is ownership. Ownership, the way I like to define this word, is with another synonym of the word, which would be excitement or enthusiasm. So, when you're enthusiastic about something, when you're excited about a particular thing, you are naturally more inclined to take more control, you are naturally inclined to take more ownership. So in the same way, once we started taking a look at the way people work, mostly my design teammates, I noticed a particular pattern, which is a very simple graph if you look at your screens. This graph talks about various stages of design process and how enthusiasm of designers usually drops or climbs in that particular stage. So, for example, once you start reading the PRDs that your product managers have written, you are mildly excited about this new idea that the PM is pitching, right? But once you start making the wireframes, then you're a little more curious about, wow, this seems like an interesting feature that you can all use your design skills for. And by the time you actually jump onto Figma, when you start making those rectangles with rounded corners and those fancy gradients, you're really, really excited that, hey, I'm going to put this new interaction that I just learned, and this is going to be an amazing story. I'm going to just put my all shots on triple, and I'm going to be very excited. But right after that, once you start handing off, or rather, even in the post handoff stage, once you start going in a stage where you have shipped the designs, but now it's time to look how well they perform, that is where we notice that the enthusiasm of people had a significant drop. People kind of treated it as their job is done, and now it's the job of a PM to take care of the designs. So that is the first thing we set out to change. How do you make sure that the overall enthusiasm level of the designers is more consistent than a curve like this? So one of the first few approaches which worked out very well in our favor is to look at the product team slightly in a different way. So on the left, you would see that there's a bunch of drawers. On the right, there's a shelf. So a good product team would be looking like a bunch of drawers to you, whereas a great product team would be a shelf. Now, what I mean by this, which means is that when you look at a drawer, the way you interact with the drawer, you don't usually open all drawers at once, right? You open one at a time, which means that you would do one thing and then you close the door and you move to the next. Now, unfortunately, most product teams which are not that efficient work in the same way. They take a requirement to a particular team, they ask for the output, and then they take it to the next one. Now, what that leads is it gives them a sense that their job is over. So, if you treat design as the first drawer, they would get a sense that, oh, my job is over, and then engineering takes over. After engineering, so testing takes over. Instead, a rather better functionality to work with is to think of it like a shell, where you have access to all the different teams right from the beginning. And what that will help you with is that you would have a very good visibility of the whole process. You would have more data points to look at right from the beginning to the end. And there's a lot of cross communication which anyway needs to happen. So ever ran into a case where you made a design and the engineering team told you that this is very difficult for us to actually bring it into code, so you might have to change something. Now, having an approach like this actually solves that kind of a problem. You don't have to go that back and forth, and you also get to take a look at your designs after they've gotten shipped, right to the point when the customer is actually using it, and you go to build the second version of it. And this slide talks about the age-old problem of designers not having a seat at the table. And this is what I'd like to talk about, that when you take a look at the whole product team in a different way, when you restructure the whole way in which product team works, then design can have a seat at the table, right from the beginning all the way to the end. And how that happens is that you have to make sure that you show enough value for the whole company, that design is involved and it's not just fancy stuff that you're making, but instead you are actually creating the value for the user by making meaningful design decisions for the product. One of the ways to do so is to make sure that you're all looking at the app along with looking at the key metrics which you usually look at. What do I mean by that? think of the way where you look at designs, right? So after you finish a design, how do you reference it? You open a Figma file and you take a look at the design and say, yeah, this is what we designed. But instead, think of the actual user who uses your app. They don't look at your Figma files, they actually look at the app. Same goes for your engineering team, the business team, the product teams as well. Number of test cases that your code has passed has nothing to do unless the same code works well on the actual app. Same goes for product as well. Like the metrics which you see on Mixpanel or Google Analytics, they mean to a certain extent, but all of that actually has to do with the app again. So the idea here is to make sure that all of your referencing which you do happens from a product first mentality, then a metrics first, then a code first, or then a Figma first mentality. Now, to go ahead with the last slide of this particular piece, I'd say that we all talk about user centric design, but we often fail to actually include the user in the design process. What does that mean? That means that a lot of time, what happens is that when you're designing something, you tend to design it in a way that you get a requirement, you start off with the requirement, and after you're done, you kind of feel that, hey, my work is done. So I'll just hand it off to my respective engineers or product managers, right? The actual user gets involved in the process way after you've designed everything. And that is what you fundamentally should be changing by introducing the user in the design process. What it means is, while you're designing something, after you've done with the first pass, probably take that whole design to a user and ask for the feedback right away. Ask them that what kind of problems do you see in the design, or are they able to even accomplish the goals that you've defined for your user. That actually will give your design a lot of soul and meaning, where you will be obsessed with the problem. So when you see something nice, you would see it coming from the user's mouth and not just numbers. If you see a problem, you would also see the same problem coming right from the user instead of just seeing a metric. So that will give your design a lot of soul and meaning. And that is what user centric design essentially means, including the user in the design process, not after it. So what was our wins? The first win that we had was we are now able to design the whole product from a design first approach. We didn't think of design as an afterthought or just as an enabler. Design was a key part of the whole process. The second is, of course, better coverage of use cases. Remember the same example that I gave you when you meet something and your engineering team told you that this wasn't possible, or you thought of something which you must have missed. Having the whole visibility of the process in the shelf-like approach helps you with making sure all the use cases which you usually miss out, you get to cover them all. And the last is the most important one, which is shipping at a higher quality, right? It doesn't matter unless the design gets shipped. The most important thing is what the user sees, not what you see on Figma. The next thing is, of course, the process, which is the major topic that I'd like to talk about next. Now, process is something that's talked about a lot. Like there's the double diamonds of the world, there's the ideate, define, empathize of the world. But what do I mean by process, and what were my goals to actually optimize the process here at my company? So my goal essentially was to create an evolving ecosystem. What I mean by this is that a lot of times what you start out while you design, a lot of things might seem very overwhelming if it's a product which is building from scratch. Now, of course, if you have a design system in place, a lot of things become easier. But if you don't, things can get very overwhelming right at the beginning. There's a lot of choices for colors, typography, the kind of design that you'd end up making towards the end, the whole visual look and feel. So the idea is that your process, your design process, should enable designers to be not overwhelmed while they start the design. They should find it helpful and use it more like a tool. So these are very basic examples of the same. On the left, you would see that there's a robust design system which you can make, which will of course help you to do the same. Similarly, the space that you see in the center is more of a templatized or a boilerplate design. For example, if you're designing for apps, there will be a few recurring elements which you'd see across multiple iterations of design. And the idea is to make sure that a designer doesn't have to do the repeated work again and again. Whatever you see a patterns repeating, optimize that process and make it into a component so that it's more easier. And last is, of course, defining a lot of guidelines. What I mean by guidelines is that a lot of times when you've defined certain design ideologies that you will follow this kind of a spacing, this kind of a particular background, it's very important to make sure that you document all these decisions, because when someone new joins your team, or even if you're working with a contractor of sorts, it often helps to have all that process documented. So, of course, like we can't talk about processes without talking about design systems, and I'll not go very much into detail with it because Tanisha after me will, of course, go through the whole thing in a much elaborate way. But I'd like to talk about just a few things in a design system. So, design system in an early stage company might be something which seems very overwhelming to begin with, because there are lots of design decisions to take, because you know that whatever you define is going to be used across the product. So you have this sense of overwhelm which you're trying to avoid, that if I make a mistake now, what will it be applicable for whole of the product? So maybe I'll just design it right now and I'll think about design system next. Now that is a mentality which you have to break right at the get-go, and you would probably get asked this question a lot from people, that what is the right time to make a design system? And I would say, when you're starting a design system can be made right at that point. And design system doesn't mean that you have to start it in the very elaborate manner by making a component library. You can just start by templatizing or documenting things which you are seeing as a repeated pattern in your designs. And the second point, which I'd like to talk about in design system, is that you need to make sure that when you make a design system, you can just start off with from a top-down approach, which means, like, instead of trying to define all of your typography, color codes, and every minor detail, you can just start with a component which you're across using multiple times in your app. A good example is a bottom sheet. If you're using a bottom sheet multiple times, to avoid different sizes, different specifications, just make a component of the same and then use it. And of course, design systems do not end at a Figma level. Design systems goes way beyond, and it actually only starts at Figma and it ends at actually making those components in code. So you need to, of course, collaborate with your coding counterparts and make sure that the design system is getting implemented on code. The next thing is called a marination period. Now, this is something we found out about a few months ago. After multiple features that we made out of the same feature, let's think of it like V1 and V2s of the same feature, we started to realize a common occurrence, which was that once we would make the V2 of it, a lot of insights would get quite obvious to us, and we would try to understand that why didn't we think of this in the first go itself? And that's when we realized that it's basically just the lack of time that we were spending with understanding the problem, and we were jumping on the solution way too quickly. The most simple analogy for this is the word marination itself. When you're trying to cook a dish like chicken, the better you marinate the product, the better outcome it gives you, right? It's the same with ideas as well. And this is the main part about the same idea, which is, instead of jumping on the how, ask yourself why. You would be getting told by product managers a lot of times that, this is how we are thinking of this feature. We are trying to think of this in this way. Ask them why. Why is the reason? Why do you think about this in this way, instead of jumping directly to the hows? And the question continues, that you need to ask a lot of questions. This is something I would say I've noticed across designers, that they usually don't ask a lot of questions. You need to be very inquisitive and very curious about things, because if you just become an enabler, then your role would get defined to that particular typecast. I mean, you'd get typecasted in the same way, and then you would not have the seat on the table which we often ask for, right? So few of the questions that you can ask to your product managers is something like this, like, what kind of value add is this feature doing to the product? Similar one is to ask, what's the right time? Like, let's think of this way, that you're building a product like Zoom, and the product manager pitches something like, you need a mascot. Ask them if this is really a right time to build a mascot for the product. Is this really going to add value? Because a lot of time your product managers would be very creative with ideas. They'll come up with very interesting things that they've seen across different apps, but sometimes it's not the right time. So you need to ask them about it and warn them of the same. The next one is very, very important, which is about asking yourself, what is the core user experience, and is your feature hampering that? So if you're working with a company like Uber, the core user experience is to book cabs. Now, whatever feature you add or remove should ensure that the core user experience doesn't get compromised in any way, because that is what actually gets you to make more revenue, right? And the last is also a very important point, which is to understand more about the future. If you're designing an app today with a particular feature in mind, you must think that what would the feature V2 and V3 look like? What would be the way in this feature would be scaled forward? Now, having said that, one of the most important things about working in startup is maintaining context. Now, why is it important? Because unlike big companies, there's very little bureaucracies and the teams are extremely lean, which means that while designing the product, you would see a lot of changes in the whole requirement itself. And as much as we try to avoid it, it will happen, because that's how startups work. And it becomes very difficult a lot of times for you to maintain context of all the changes that are being suggested while you start design, or even after you've started design. So there are some neat hacks that we found out on how you can maintain context better. One of which is maintaining a context log. So as soon as you start designing a particular feature, you would notice that you have a requirement and you have certain amount of insights you can start with. But while you are designing it, you would get an idea that, oh, this can be done differently. And it's important that all of your stakeholders know about it, and you also need to make sure that you document it. Because what often happens is once you look back at the way a product was made or a feature was made, you would notice that you would start to miss out on certain information which was the middle, because you know how it was defined on Jira and you know what you've designed, but the middle part is often gone, and this helps you to maintain that, and that's going to be extremely helpful to understand the design decisions you've taken and to justify them forward going forward as well. Now let's take a look at under the hood. What I mean by that is what kind of things can you do inside Figma which will help you to do the same in a more efficient manner. So one of the things that we tried out on Figma was practices like adding annotations, things like adding flow arrows. I'll go into detail with each of them after I introduce each. Naming layers, local components, checklist, and playground files. So by annotations, what I mean is describing different behaviors of certain design components. Now, of course, we encourage highly that people would make prototypes, but a lot of times certain things are not clear from a prototype. A good example would be that you're trying to show a loading animation, but what's the exact duration of the animation? What's the playback speed? If you're showing a transition state, for exact duration of the transition state, you can't exactly know it from the prototype, right? So either you would be writing specs, but a better, even if you don't want to write the exact specs for the developers, a good idea is to describe the behavior of your components in design. And the example, as you can see in the picture, is to define the character limit of a particular piece of content that you're writing. Flow arrows is also extremely useful, which basically is just tying up a bunch of arrows to indicate what each button takes you to a different screen. Now, why this is helpful, again, you can say that prototyping helps you with this, but if you want to reference something really quickly, then you can't wait for a prototype to open and go through the whole flow to understand. Flow arrows gives you that visibility right on the Figma file itself. Naming layers is something which is very specific to designers, and some people like to do it and some people hate to do it, and I might get a bit of hate for this, but I don't mind it because I feel that's a very good practice. Now, why? Because once you start taking your design and making components out of them, or you try to think of design in a more scalable sense, you'd notice that naming things are extremely helpful, because as things get more and more complex, if you're designing for a web flow, which by web flow I mean a website flow, you will see a lot of elements overlapping one after the other, and a lot of these elements would be reused at different places as well. And once you start making a very complex flow, frame 2134 will not be helpful for you. Rather, naming it in a convention which will be describing what kind of behavior it will hold, will be a lot more helpful. The last part is called local components. Not the last, third last. The local components part is basically, instead of creating design systems, the idea is that instead of creating components right for the design system, idea is that when you're designing a feature, you can just create a local component in that file itself, and then later you can decide whether that feature is actually going to go into the product, if it's going to be used at other places, and then you can take that and add it to the design system. It also helps you with changing a lot of requirements on the go. So let's say that you built a whole flow, but the PM suddenly says that, let's change the color or let's change this particular thing. Instead of changing it at multiple places, if you're using a local component, it'll just help you to change everything in once. The second last is, of course, checklist. So what I mean by checklist is the list of same few things that you see here, along with a few more, which just helps you to make sure that all of the processes that you define for your teams are being followed rigorously, and nobody misses out or takes a little shortcut which compromises on the design quality. And last is playground files. Recently, there was a debate on Twitter about should people be doing messy design or should it be very clean. Now, I am very strong believer that you should have, the creativity will only come if you remove the constraints for a while. So playground files are files where you can be completely messy and you can do all the dirty work. And then while you are trying to add those designs to the actual developer, give them to the developer, then you can add it to a handoff file or something like that. But it's important to have that creativity without constraint. And these are the same benefits which we just talked about. It will help you in communicating these behaviors to the developers better, simplifying this extremely complicated flows through flow arrows. Scalable design system is what will be extremely helpful in case you start naming the layers. It will help you to define the behavior of various components once you start describing them. And maintaining design standard is what we achieve with the checklist. And last was about the whole playground file, which was creativity without constraints. The last part, which I want to talk about, is called org design. So just defining the process or ensuring certain ways to increase ownership is not enough. If you're trying to create a team which works very well with the other different verticals, you need to make some fundamental changes in the way which the org also works. And one of the first thing which we tried was writing a culture doc. Now, what does a culture doc mean? It can be from a company level as well, but what I mean here is that more of a design culture doc. It is basically just a list of design philosophies that you have, And the idea to write it down is to ensure that all of your teammates are on the same page regarding to those design philosophies. For example, a good anecdote here is that when you're working at a startup, you can't really use an old file and build design on top of that, because there are no teams which just work on improving something separately. Everyone works on a new feature, and if you just keep building something on top of the existing designs, your overall design standard is very difficult to improve with every iteration. So, as a design philosophy at my company, we have a practice that whenever we design a flow which involves a roller screen, we take that and make sure that that's also improved along with this flow. And there can be multiple things like this which you can include in your culture doc. But it's very important to make sure that this is not just your philosophy, it needs to come from your teammates as well, and it needs to be a collaborative list of ideas. The second is called a product newsletter. Now, that's just a fancy name for making sure that all the high level changes from your stakeholders are getting communicated. Now, especially smaller teams face this problem that when you have a very lean team, it's very easy to communicate it, right? Let's say you have a team of 10. Whatever the CEO says, everybody hears it on the meeting and they start applying the same. But once you take this team of 10 and scale it to hundreds, a lot of people will feel that, okay, these people are not important, I'll just communicate to the next person and hope that they will communicate to the next person. Unfortunately, that hope is often unfulfilled and the communication happens to have a lapse. A product newsletter is basically is just an email, for example, which has a lot of changes on a product level that the leadership believes should be there, and it's sent to everybody at the company, whoever is involved in the product. So it ensures that everybody is on the same page, everybody is aligned on all the changes which are being suggested, and there's no lapses of communication. Now, at our company, we also do a meeting every month where we discuss about all the changes which were done in the previous iteration, and we also discuss the impact of these changes. But I'm a very strong believer of things should be done asynchronously. So this helps you in case somebody misses out on the meeting as well. The next thing is learning us, which is a very easy and simple concept where each of your team members would be good at one particular skill, right? Let's say somebody is good at motion, someone else is good at documenting, someone else is good with visuals. And if that particular person is not there on the team, your work as a team shouldn't stop. So this just means that you take out certain time from your week and you ensure that each of your team member can teach all of your team members certain skills. It can start with a very simple thing, like if somebody is very good at Figma, they can just teach auto layout to all of your team members. But in the next one, they can teach more complex stuff like complex component properties. The next one is called 360-degree feedback. This is extremely helpful if you're trying to lead a team or build a team. So we often need feedback from our seniors, right? We often crave for feedback from our managers, but especially if you're leading a team, the feedback from your teammates is way more important than what you receive from your boss, because they are the ones you're primarily working with on an everyday basis, and it needs to be ensured that you are doing the right things for them. One good example is to make sure that you chalk out a good growth plan for each of them, right? Talk to your teammates and understand their strengths and weaknesses. You might also find out that some of them might not be at the same, they necessarily don't see the work in the same way that you do. Some of them will be more serious about the work. Some of them will find it a little casual. They might be at a phase of their life they don't value your job as much. But it's very important to understand this difference and make sure that you incorporate that into your design process for the whole team. And last is basically engaging beyond work. Now, you need to understand this, that if you just maintain a relationship with your colleagues as a colleague, then it seems very artificial and synthetic. They will not know you as a person, and same will happen with you. You will not know them as a person. So it's very important to engage with them outside of work, sometimes to know what things they like, what kind of sports events they watch after the weekend, and to just engage in more conversations which are off work. It helps to create that human bond, which is often very crucial while ensuring that you work in a very collaborative manner and you make sure that you understand each other well. So just to recap all the three main points we talked about, the first is, of course, you need to advocate for involving design in the product process. We talked about different ways you can do that, the different ways in which you can see the whole product teams working. You can change it to a shelf-like approach. The second one is ensuring that if you're optimizing a process, you need to make designing easier for designers. Designing shouldn't be tough by any chance. If you're introducing auto layout, if you're introducing more complex practices, you need to ensure that there should be some way in which you can automate it and your team members should find it more easier. The last one is to start a lot of organization-wise initiatives which will foster growth of your fellow teammates. Because of course, if you're just doing the job, you're not learning enough. So you need to ensure that the same problem which I faced is possibly something you shouldn't face if you're working in the same team as I am. So with that, I'd like to finish the talk. That's pretty much it. You can find me on Twitter by this handle, and that's it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Aditya. It was a very fancy little lesson on design and management. So thank you for that. I hope you guys have had a lot to learn now, since you guys are all designers, and perhaps if any one of you wants to start a team of your own, this is what you do, right? Great. Thank you, Aditya. Thanks a lot for that. All right. As always, of course, I see a lot more new faces and new people in the crowd. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. And if there are new people joining us online as well, hi, welcome. Uh, I don't think you guys missed a lot, but if you did, Aditya will be around. So you can always ask him to do his presentation over again for you. Just form a little group around him. Uh, Great. Moving on. I want to take this time to introduce you guys to our next speaker on the cards. She's a fashion designer turned UI UX designer and developer, and she's the mind behind some of the craziest things that have come out of the Geeky Ants product studio. So please join me in welcoming with a big round of applause, Tanisha Biswas, everybody.
And I work as a UI UX designer here at Geeky Ants. And today I'll take this opportunity to start a discussion in general about a topic which is very near to my heart, as well as to my work life in general, which is design systems. Now, getting started with the presentation, I would like to throw light on the topic that design systems have become the talk of the town, and having a design system in place has started to be considered as an integral part of managing an organization or a product at scale. Be it large organizations or very small startups, everybody is retrospecting and asking themselves questions like whether they need a design system, when is the right time to have a design system, and is it too late for them to have a design system. Now, when I started with my readings about design system, I expected that I will find a lot of articles and lot of documentations on what a design system is, what it consists, how to manage a design system, and that's exactly what I found over the net. The number of design systems that you come across in the net is humongous. There are many different big companies who have published their design system for everyone to acknowledge and learn from. And having said that, when it comes to the definition around design system, there seems to be a myriad of definition, but with a blurry border. Now, this variety is very overwhelming, and it seems to have caused some preconceived notion about design systems, which makes a certain section of our community feel skeptical about adopting a design system. Now, for anyone who is stuck in that bubble, here is a small presentation that would help burst some very common myths that follow design system and gain a fresh perspective around defining a design system. Now, I keep hearing a lot of definitions around what is a design system. So, I would rather start by saying what is not a design system. So, a component library that you have is not your design system. A design system is not another project. And a design system is not just for the design team. Now, what is a design system in that case? Well, since design system is all about collaboration and it should be multidisciplinary, I've kept this slide empty so that together we can come up with a more inclusive way of defining a design system after this presentation. So we'll get back to the slide later. Um, Starting away with the common myths around design system, the first is the myth of creative restraint. Some designers feel that a design system will inhibit their creative freedom and or might even replace them. So this is something that I've come across. It's a tweet from a designer which says that design systems are really just a bunch of UI kits and libraries of icons. People aren't designing; they are just rearranging components someone else designs. Now, this concept suggests a lack of understanding of what a design system is in totality. So we need to understand that the design system is not just to provide a foundation for visual expression. It has a lot of different aspects involved. A good design system takes into consideration a wide range of aspects that of the company's operations. So everything that makes up your product, from typography, layouts, grids, colors, icons, components, coding conventions, voice and tone, content strategy, documentation, and of course a few more different elements that is very specific to a company. A design system brings every one of these together in a way that allows your entire team to learn, to build, and to grow together. Now, when these broader aspects are left out, you'll probably end up with a design system which is incomplete, and therefore, within few months, you'll get outdated, and mostly it will get abandoned after a few months since you don't have a system that will let you deal with the evolving creature that your product or, in fact, the design system is. So the second point here is a conception where people think that design systems are just for designers. Now, here we need to educate ourselves to understand that the how you go about creating something is just as important as about the why. Design system consists of a lot of elements, and each of the elements is important and serves some kind of benefit to the entire team. So, for example, if I'm talking about design tokens, they give a common language for designers as well as developers and help them communicate better without any and help them be on the same page. Uh, for example, we have benefits from the component library, which is just a part of a design system. They speed up the development process, brings the concept of reusability and consistency. It makes customization of components easier to manage and ensure better quality over time. The third one is documentation. So, like it has already been mentioned, a proper documentation of information sharing ensures a proper information sharing in and around the team. It's especially useful when someone is onboarding new member to the team. Now, again, there are 100 more benefits of a design system, like workspace for collaboration, better consistency, better quality and accessibility, lower design or code maintenance, shared ownership, and avoiding soil knowledge. Now, coming to the third myth around design system is that the design systems are set in stone. It's a fact that design systems are built in response to inconsistencies, but we also need to understand that flexibility and consistency are not mutually exclusive. The goal of a design system is not just to guide the initial product development. It surely smoothens the process, but that's not the only reason why we should have a design system. Because of this, we need to maintain, update, and evolve our design system just as we do to our products, so that our design system is not outdated and it doesn't lead to restricting us or limiting us as designers, developers, or anybody in the team. Now that we have a little fresh perspective of design system, let's try to wrap up our this presentation by defining a design system in a more inclusive way. So one thing I understood about design system is that calling design system complex is rather an understatement. This is something that I tweeted a few days back, and to understand what people think about design system based on their roles. Now, based on my Twitter reach, which is not that much, but still, I tried to collect different perspectives around design system, and also I've added some common definitions of design system from different articles and books, and I try to notice a common way of defining a design system, and that would be to break down the definition into four major questions, which is: what is it, why do we need it, what does it include, and what does it provide. Now, combining these keywords, I've tried to curate a very open ended, inclusive way of defining a design system, which goes something like this: that a design system is a principle, pattern, collection, set, documentation, standard, building blocks, single source of truth that helps us in managing design, reduce redundancy, define overall product, tying the whole product together, explicitly communicate, accelerate the design process, which includes reusable components, UI patterns, style guides, coding conventions, voice, tone, tokens, technical documentation, and to provide us a shared language, visual consistency, standardization, rapid product development growth, and better organization. So I hope this way we can cover deeper verticals and broader horizons of defining a design system. I'll keep on editing this slide so that as and when I get more inputs from the community in future, I can also add them. Feel free to comment on the Twitter thread to help me add your perspective to what a design system should mean. And I think that's it from my side. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanisha. Some serious myths we have busted today. All right, folks. Once again, thank you, Tanisha, for that concise, crisp, and brilliant presentation. Now's the time that we're going to take a 10 minutes break. I've already got my refreshments. Your refreshments are waiting for you outside. We've got Coke, we've got chips, biscuits, water, tea, coffee, juice. I don't know, you'll find your way. You'll see what's there. So we will reconvene here after 10 minutes. And in those 10 minutes, do not forget to network. Do not forget to get to know each other. We see a lot more people that have walked in now. Again, hi. Uh, and obviously, if you like what's going on here, tweet about us as well. And we will see you again in 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Got your refreshments. I hope you've all got an opportunity to talk to each other, get to know each other, which is extremely important. I cannot emphasize on it enough. But it's time to get on with the show. And now I would like to introduce you guys to somebody who's joining us remotely right now. He's someone who's been revolving around the design sphere for a little more than 8 years now, and has achieved quite a handful. And right now, he's currently utilizing his expertise and his knowledge to help Athena Health build the ultimate interoperability app. The funny thing is, he also shares his birthday with my little sister, which makes me like him a little more. I haven't met him yet, but and today he's going to be talking about how you can validate your ideas using something called a confidence test. So, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for the co-founder of Peerlist, designer Dada, Akash. How are you doing today, Akash? I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I can, loud and clear. Doing good, doing good.
Oh, great, we can hear you too. Great, how's
Nice.
your day been today?
So far, so good. Let's see how the talk
Fantastic.
goes.
Fantastic. All right, all right. We're really excited that you've joined us today. And we have a lot of people here who are really looking forward to hearing what you have to say today. So I will leave the screen to you. And all the best, Akash. Thank you so much. A big round of applause for Akash, guys.
Okay, so I think I have shared my screen. Yes. Cool. Hello, everyone. Unfortunately, I can't see you folks, but that's okay. That's how we are rolling for past couple of years. So I will be talking about a very simple thing called as confidence test. And before that, I'll just tell you who exactly I am. So I'm Akash. I started as a web designer, then front-end developer, then I again become UI designer, and now in my past company Athena Health, I was a product designer. I was managing a team of five product folks there. Now I am a co-founder at Peerlist, taking care of all the product designing, management, and so on. I live in Pune, and I love street photography. That is what I do on the weekends, and urban sketching. That is what where I disengage myself from everything and do these things to separate out from work and other things. And this is the Peerless design team. So I am the sole designer because we have small team, like four, five folks. We are working on Peerless, and I take care of the design. So these are all the roles which I play during our building process. So getting on to the topic, what is confidence test? So you can actually, this is actually a process which I learned during my previous job at Athena Health from my manager, Michael. And it's a very simple process to basically validate your idea, feature, or problem and gain confidence of your users, team, and leadership before you start building any feature, right? So why you should do that? There are different what we say uh, reasons to do so. So you can as a good designer or a great designer, whatever is the difference, this could be the game changer for you. If you need a place on a chair on a table as a designer, this will help you a lot. So how basically confidence test work, or how you basically validate your ideas? The very first is go and brainstorm your idea with your team. Whatever, if it is a new feature, or if you have an idea about improving the existing feature which you want to make some changes to, and if you have a really different idea which could change the way your users are using your product or service, if you want to validate that, just go and talk to people who are working with you, designers, engineers, product managers, or leadership. And the very first thing is understand why it's not built yet, why it doesn't exist so far. Understand the history behind your feature, because there might be a case that product managers or the leadership might have thought about building this or making this improvement, but because of some things or the limitations they could not do it. This will save your time unnecessarily spending on something which you cannot build. So this is a very important thing. Also, it will help you understand the problem better. So I always say, if you want to understand a problem better, understand the history. If you want to come up with a really good solution, understand the future. So it is in the context of your product. The first step is design a prototype. Of course, just quickly build a high or low fidelity prototype depending on if you have a design system, you can basically build it very quickly. Go to Figma, build a clickable prototype, how it will work on a very high level. What is your idea? What you are trying to solve? Don't spend more than a day on this because you really need to iterate things faster. So just whatever you are going to build in a day, just go ahead with that. Involve your engineers at this very step. So this is the most important thing which many of us designers miss out on, not involving your engineers and other stakeholders at the beginning. We might spend a lot of time on a particular idea because we love it, and in the end we might find that nobody is aligned with that particular idea. So as I think Aditya mentioned, that you have to build those relations with your teammates beyond the work. This is where you basically onboard your colleagues and peers on the idea which you want to work. The second step is, it's very simple. Just record a video, and this will make you look out really well your idea and you yourself as a designer as well. A picture worth 1,000 words, but addition to that is, but a video worth a million pictures, right? It really helps to understand the end user or the person whom you want to explain the idea. When you show them something and talk about it in a video, they can understand your problem much better. They can understand the solution which you are proposing in a much better way. And even if you're introvert, doesn't matter, don't show your face, only record screen and forward it. This is very helpful. This rectifies lot of explanation, lot of steps, lot of feedback which might come in if you don't do this. Lot of criticism might come in because they don't understand your perspective. With this step, you can rectify all of that and make your idea, interpreting your idea in a much better way. Don't spend much time, make it like 3 or 4 minutes video, and explain what you are trying to build and what you are trying to solve. The third step, which is 2.1, I would say do a quick survey after that. So what we do is we record a video, and then there are 4 questions which are right here, like how satisfied you are with the current feature or solution. If you are improving a particular solution, uh, will this feature or whatever I'm proposing right now will improve your workflow or will improve whatever you are trying to accomplish with that? Will that improve? Higher the better. Ask them to rate from 0 to 5, and that will help. How likely you will use it when you are sending it to user? Ask them this question. It is very important. Whether it is will they actually use it when you push it or publish ship it, right? This will help you in the later stage. And can the proposed solution be improved? So you can ask them for an explanation, like I am having this problem, but whatever the proposed solution you have is not solving that, so can you add that also? So this will help you to improve whatever you are proposing, whatever your design solution is. And these are just the 4 simple questions which you're going to ask after the video which you send. Then the third or fourth step is quick survey for engineers. One question: can we build this? Because if yes, how much time we might need? Because it will the business or the leadership team really wants to understand that, because we'll be spending a lot of time and money on building a particular solution. Also, if we can't, what is holding us back? What are the blockers? What are our limitations? That why we could not build this particular feature? That will help us understand your engineering in a much better way. whenever you are designing or proposing some new features in the future. So, as I said, because your engineers are involved in the very initial stage of your this confidence survey or confidence test, I don't think there will be a problem to get an yes from engineers when you reach to this step. And this is really, really important one. The final step is once you build it, once you so even before this, once you have all the outcome of the surveys, you have the numbers, you go and propose your idea to your product manager or the leadership that we want to build this, right? There will be a question which is why we want to build it. What is the conclusive data which we have? Then you have all the survey answers, which are the users who have asked for it, what are their feedback on the particular feature or design or a solution which you are proposing. In a meeting, you will go with tremendous amount of confidence because your solution is backed by data with his confidence test. And that is why this is called as confidence test. You have confidence presenting it because your users and engineers have confidence building it and using it. And this is this is very important. Your leadership team or the product managers, there won't be much to oppose your solution because it is backed by your users and your engineers and the data and the feedback they have provided you. So why it is important? Very important in our context at Purelist, we are like very small team. It's very important for us to spend time on things uh, which make sense and which are significant, which have significant impact on the outcomes which we want. So to avoid building useless features, the features which might not be used by users or they might take it as a surprise that why it is even built, right? Because we live in our assumptions and we just build it to understand your user needs, right? And then to understand whether your engineers can build it, there is a high possibility that whatever your solution is, because of your engineering inputs, you might improve it by 10x. And it happens almost 70%, 80% of the time. Also, to build a product roadmap aligned with your stakeholders, users, product vision which you have, in the market which you are building for, before whatever you are building, you know because of the survey that it is aligned with all the stakeholders, what the company vision is, and it is taking us closer to that vision, whatever we are building. And you get that particular confidence when you have this survey or this test done. Why it's important for you as a product designer? As I mentioned, it will differentiate a good designer and a great product designer, right? You can be a great product designer with or doing all these things because you are selling your designs to the business. Imagine it as a very tiny, miny startup idea itself, which is backed by the data, the user surveys, and research. You are going to your leadership and they are, when they say yes, we will build this, that means they are investing in your idea. And doing this survey gonna help you a lot do that. You become a very significant contributor to your product roadmap, and that is that should be your job as a product designer, right? You should have those significant contributions in the product roadmap, in the product building, whatever your features which you are building. You should not be only taking those Jira tasks or linear tasks and designing the screens. This should be your 50% of the job where you are generating tremendous amount of idea and helping your product be much better and helping your end users in a much better way. This is going to save a lot of time and lot of money. You are saving money, that means you are making money. Imagine you are building a feature where you have spent a month with two engineers, one designer, one product manager. You have already spent almost 15-20 lakh rupees on that particular feature building for a month. And if nobody is going to use it, you have wasted that much of money, right? If you think that way, you will understand how significant this step could be, and this is gonna get you sit on that table whenever the product managers, whenever the leadership is talking about new features and a product vision, you will be asked there, and your say will be considered because you have proven yourself with your process which you have. So yeah, that's it. I think that's what I wanted to say. Thank you so much. If you want to follow me on Twitter, Peerlist, that's my handle. Thank you so much.
I'm here. Hi, you can see me, right? Akash?
Yes,
Oh, okay. There you are. You can you hear me just fine? I don't know if you can. Just say something if you can.
I can. I can. I can.
Okay, great. There's a little bit of delay. We'll manage. Anyway, thank you, Akash. Thank you for that extremely informative and wonderful talk. Obviously, you're not here in person, so the folks here attending in person would not be able to, have a chat with you. Wish we could, but hopefully next time. Next time, whenever you're in Bangalore, hopefully we'll meet. Uh, but other than that, thank you so much for joining us remotely and speaking to the folks that have joined us here in person and online as well. So I hope you have a wonderful day ahead. We all hope you have a wonderful day ahead. And thanks again. You take care. All right. Good. Okay. I think we are fine now. Right. So that brings us to the end of the talks that we have for this evening. Now we have a little bit of a fun game that we'd like to play with all of you. It's a small quiz, won't take much long, but we have prizes to distribute. So all the designers in the house, probably it's a good time for you to get your hands on some goodies. Maybe we can have more lights in the room.
Are speakers allowed?
Sorry
Are the speakers allowed?
to answer. If you think you're feeling lucky, why not? All right, great. Do we have everybody in order? We've got the prize sitting right there. Good. All right. So this is going to take us not more than a minute. Okay, so you need to be extremely quick. The first one who gets the answer right gets the prize. Question one: when did Figma launch? 2000? No. You're not allowed second tries. Anybody else? You're getting close, but no.
2016. It's a random.
It's like a game of poker right now. Just throw random numbers in the box. Somebody is bound to get it right. 2011.
2016.
One at a time. 14. 16. Okay. Do you know which date in 2016? Does anybody know? Does anybody have an idea? No? Okay, fine. You get the prize. It's 27th September 2016. Can we get a prize for her, please? A big round of applause. Goodies. Goodies. How many of you do use Figma? Are you serious? Oh boy. Okay. What's the shortcut for auto layout in Figma? नहीं चाहिए दे दो दे दो Congratulations, Aditya. I guess it was your lucky day. Big round of applause for Aditya, please. This is a doozy. And the final question: what are the steps of the double diamond design model? Okay. Okay. Anybody else wants to try that luck?
Is divergent convergent, divergent convergent?
You want to give it an attempt. Go for it.
define, discover, design, prototype, and taste.
You're halfway there. Anybody else wants to attempt this? You are very close. Did you get the last step?
Okay, define, discover,
Yep.
design, uh, analysis.
Anybody else?
So define, discover, ideate, prototype, test.
That's again halfway right.
Ideate, prototype, and then test. Iterate.
I'll have to confirm that, Mega.
Test, validate, iterate.
There are 4 steps. The 4 Ds.
Only 4 days.
Discover, define, design, iterate.
Finally, good job. We have another winner. What were you waiting for? Did you want us to do this dance before you had your moment? Congratulations. And we are out of goodies. All right, folks. This is the time for the final segment of this evening. We are going to have a panel discussion. So while that happens, if you guys can just bear with us for like 5 minutes, we'll get this entire thing set up, and then we will call all of our panelists as well. So we would require some help from the team. Is the team listening? Yep, I can see them. Okay, good. Great. Take the podium out. बस ऐसा लगा ठीक है ठीक है हाँ गिरा तो उसको थोड़ा सा हो गया All right. I guess we are ready. We have got some mood lighting going on as well, which is nice. So let me introduce you guys to all of our panelists today. First of all, the design director here at Geeky Ants, Megha. Welcome. Please have a seat. Oh, Akash is already here. Hi again, Akash. I didn't see you there. Where do I look? Well,
Keep that chair empty, by the way.
I think you brought your own chair. Great. I'd also like to introduce you guys to one of the core team members of at Razorpay, the design director, Arun. Is he? There he is. Hi Arun, welcome. Please have a seat.
Which chair is Akash's?
Akash has his own chair. We don't have to leave a chair for him. Should we, Akash? I mean, you won't mind, right?
No, that's fine.
Okay, great. And I would like to call on stage again Aditya, our speaker for the day. Come on in. I will just sit myself down in this corner. Oh, I've been waiting to sit for so long. Oh, I have questions. I have tons of questions. All right, so we're going to be talking about everything design today. And I think the best way for us to begin would be for me to ask you guys. Good, right? Okay. Akash, you can also hear me, right? Just confirming. Fantastic. So I'd like to ask all of you guys, and I think Akash, since you brought your own chair, you have that comfort. I'll ask you this first. How did your journey as a designer start, and what all things would you consider as milestones in your journey so far that brought you where you are at this point?
I started as a very stupid designer, honestly. I used to design in HTML and CSS. That was the design. There was no initial PhDs or Photoshop or anything like that. We used to directly do HTML, CSS and do the changes. It was 2011-12, and that's how I started. And I think then graduating to and working with startups at very small stages helped me a lot. There was good mentors which helped me a lot, and I don't think I could learn anything on my own, at least in design. If I owe to all the mentors who helped me. So you always learn designing and all these things from people around you and improve. And if I say milestone, my previous job, like at Athena Health, where we designed EHR for mobiles, that helped me a lot. That helped me how to talk to users, how to sell your designs, how to uh, negotiate, how to not compromise with your designs, and so much. So I think, yeah, that was a milestone, and that gave me confidence basically to start up. So yeah.
Fantastic. Aditya, what about you?
Nice to put me on spot right away.
Why not? You've already won your prize.
Sure.
I guess that's the least you owe me right now.
Sure. Yeah, my design journey was very similar to a lot of designers who would be here. Like how you start with. What Akash did not mention, like designing with posters in colleges.
Right.
That's how most people, I think, discover design. Where someone asks, we want a poster for this event. Any of you who don't code can they help me out like this?
And it can be as chaotic as you want.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, like that design, initially, I think you just go to FreePick and download a template and you're like, I designed this.
Right.
That's how it starts. But then you start to get really creative. You're like, yeah, this is interesting. That's how it starts. So my journey was filled with a lot of hackathons which I attended in college, a ton of hackathons and a lot of internships, freelance, and yeah, I guess it was more of that. And milestone wise, joining my first full-time role as a designer was a big significant achievement. And then we reached a scale where we got to 1 million total users and then 2 million users. So those were really remarkable things to see, especially when you come from a freelance kind of a background where you're just giving the designers, giving the person their designs, taking the money and going away, to a particular stage where you can see people using your design. That was a very significant milestone.
And I think being a freelancer, it also takes a lot of discipline in terms of growing yourself, because you don't have any external factors that would want you to grow or push you towards that growth. It's just you, your zeal,
Correct.
and you just push yourself. Say, okay, I want to be better. I want to
Exactly.
create better designs. I think
Absolutely.
that kind of enriches the entire experience, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it teaches you a lot. So initially, there's very little criticism, or even the criticism is highly specific to their own taste, because design is sometimes subjective.
Right.
But then you learn a lot of things. Then you learn which kind of criticisms to take, which not to take, and so you grow ahead.
Sure, sure. With a fantastic story. Megha,
Yeah.
everything
Why?
that we are doing here right now is
Yes.
us. So, what was it like for you?
Oh, for me, it's kind of mixed for both of you. Like, yeah, I was UI developer before, had some knowledge about design as well. Like, I was aware of Photoshop, so initially started with freelancing for UI development, like for taking the websites and all. But there I was putting my ideas as well, improving their designs, the designs what I was getting from client. I was doing some improvements in that. At least I was adding interactions there. So that was my good thing, I'll say. I was being, being appreciated by taking those extra things. And then I think, okay, I like this thing. I like this interaction thing a lot. And from there, it's moved on. And yes, I got
Here we
interest
are.
in designs as well. Yes, this is my milestone,
Yeah.
you say. So first milestone would be the, having this company, and then second would be having this entire team.
Yep.
This is what I-
Shout out to you guys. You're doing an excellent job.
Yes.
Arun, design at Razorpay. Everybody talks about it.
Right.
Do they?
Everybody talks
Yeah.
about it. Heck, I am not a designer. I talk about it.
Good to hear.
What's the story?
I was connecting to what these folks have also mentioned. Mine's equally funny, if not more. So that's a professional photographer, and growing up, it was just natural for us to just tinker with everything that had technology in it, right? So started with that, but then uh, when I went to Roorkee, I met the co-founders of Razorpay, Harshal and Shashank, they're seniors of mine, and we had an idea to do something for the campus. Uh, can we build a few digital products for the campus to make students and everyone's life kind of better? So I started doing what I knew, thanks to
Tinker.
that. Exactly. Right. So I just started just putting my finger wherever I was not allowed to, and that's how it started for me. That's one of the biggest milestones, I'd say. And most of you would not know. I was so naive. I still am. That till the end, I didn't know that this is a profession and you get paid for this.
Okay.
So sounds a little funny, but I'm a biotech graduate. I almost had my tickets booked to Georgia so that I can just go do my master's in genetic engineering. A bunch of juniors from college have interned at a few startups back then. They've come back to me and they've discussed how much you earn as a designer. And it's like, oh, why am I even doing this genetic engineering?
Aren't you glad you get those
Exactly.
tickets now?
I get nightmares thinking about it. Right now.
Like, oh God, I want to fly to Georgia. I don't want to be here.
Right? I would have been on a home loan, student loan and whatnot. So thank God for these juniors who've opened up my eyes that this is not just a hobby. You do get paid in this, and some good money as well.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. so once I guess Akash is trying to say something. Yeah. So once
After
Harshal,
you.
once Harshal and Shashank started off with Razorpay, it was just natural for me and a bunch of folks who've done some similar stuff at the campus to just join them. And post that, every single milestone that I had was again related to pretty much Razorpay. And it's also so funny that the moment you were asking these questions, I had no answer. I have no clue the shortcuts on Figma. I have no clue what the double diamond processes are. I have none. What I did, I think I'm very proud of it. What I did is I just, whenever I didn't know things, I just hired the right people for it.
That's a skill in itself, right? I'd shake your hand, but I guess I'll just be in the way, so I'll do that later just for that. Well, since we're talking about, coming from all these different backgrounds, just getting into these things and uh, tinkering with different things, putting your feet into different waters and just figuring out how it is. And there's also a question that I usually keep thinking about. Haven't had the gall to ask a designer because I do not know what kind of reception I'd receive. But now that we have this stage and I have this stage where I'm very safe, I'm going to ask this question. I've seen designers work, right? And I see that there's just this innate ability to understand whether something looks right or not. So is that a skill that you can train, or is it really innate? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do you have to be artistic in order to be a designer, or how much percentage of would you credit it to creativity, the skills that you have as a designer? So, what would you guys have to say about that? Anybody could go.
I'll take a stab at it.
All right.
Also, when you say creativity, I'm thinking you're not just asking about the visual or just the look and feel of it. You're in general talking about, can we solve a particular problem with design in a creative way? Right? So, if I were to take this particular statement, the answer is a definite yes.
Okay.
Right? Where and it's the same for everywhere, right? Like even for product managers, I'm guessing it's not a textbook principle that you follow as step 1, step 2, step 3, and then you're done. You have a product out there ready, right? You have to be creative enough to understand. Fair enough. This is a particular problem that is being faced by my customers, and how can I solve it in the best way possible with all the resources that I have currently, right? So keeping this in mind, definitely creativity is one of the most important factors. And the answer to, can you teach this to someone, I am not sure, primarily because I've had my fair share of troubles with a few folks who were very difficult to kind of work with. I've also had a lot of good time working with some folks who've kind of picked up things super fast, right? And if we were talking only about the visual aspect of design, should we be artistic or not? Recently, with the industry kind of pushing the bar on visual quality, again the answer is not textbook over here. It can't just be that your product should just look absolutely beautiful for you to kind of earn that revenue, and neither can I say that it's completely fine, you can just chuck it out of the park, just do a functional thing and then you're done with it, right? It all depends on what's your product, what's your brand like, and how your customers are. In fact, to take an example, not sure how many of you have seen the products that are being developed in the Southeast Asian countries, right? Over there, minimalism, clean look and feel doesn't work at all. The moment you provide a very clean looking interface to these users in Southeast Asia, they'll be like,
right
there's
off the
nothing
bat.
in this.
Yeah.
Like maybe you do not provide anything.
They want
Like,
dialog bubbles, huge colors.
they
bright
want
colors.
everything on their face
Super
in that
zoom.
one screen. Right?
Yeah.
So, but is that beautiful or not? Is that working or not? Again, I can't just
Very subjective.
Exactly, it's a very
Very
subjective.
Right. Akash, what would you say? Is it trainable, or do you need to be born with it?
I think you train your eyes over the period of time, right? We always look at different apps, different websites, different products, and that's how you train your eyes. Many of the designers must have faced this question in the interviews that what are your top 3 apps which you like, right? The question or the expected answer is like how basically what are your sources of inspiration and references. That tells your taste in design, that tells how you have developed that eye of that creativity. Also I think more than creativity, it's a lot of about creative thinking. The one very most important or like example which I always use is Paytm had uh, one problem in the initial days. After the successful payment, they used to say show the checkbox that payment is done. What people used to do is take the screenshot and show the chaiwala every time the same screenshot that I have paid, I have paid. How are you going to solve that problem? A simple solution was show the animated tick, right? It was a very simple solution. Show the timestamp, show an animated checkbox, and the problems get solved. It's a huge problem, but it is solved very creatively with design. And I think this is kind of a thinking is there, then I think you're good.
Right, right. Megha, since you've been working with so many people, so many different designers, what are your observations?
Uh, being creative is actually one of the part that designer has to be there. Design needs to have, but it's not the only thing, obviously, because creativity is one thing that makes the things beautiful, but there is another aspect make the things usable. And usability is also there, so it should always be the balance. You have to have, but it can be trained. Yes, that's what I have seen, that's what I have feel. If you have eye to detailing, if you have this understanding of the problem, understanding about the user who is going to use it, and then mix of all these things can brought up this creativity, because you take some references, you take some inputs from your you daily use apps and all, so that can be trained as well. But yes, you should always have this interest, so
Right.
interest matters a lot
Right.
in
Well,
that case.
it's funny because for me personally, creativity was very subjected to till I started working with designers personally. For me, creativity was very subjected to picking the right color or having the right color combinations. And I'm horrible. I'm colorblind, so that was something that I absolutely struggled with. If you guys come up to me and ask me what color T-shirt I'm wearing, I'm just going to walk out and you'll never see me again. So for me, creativity was very, very restricted in terms of these simple things that okay, you know if an element is placed in the center of a screen or not. If it's not, you have the eye to know that it's deviated, or if you know what the colors go with what, or what colors are warm, what colors are nice, what colors are not. So I was very, very restricted by this. But when I started working closely with designers, I understood that creativity innately is a lot more. There's so many different factors, so many dimensions to it. So, Aditya, since you started out as a freelancer, did you also follow the same suite, or did you already have a certain idea, or what was this like for you? I mean, in terms of having a sense of creativity, or did you even consider yourself creative at all when you first started out?
Yeah, yeah. I think majority of all the points which I had have been covered wonderfully. But one thing I see, which is a common occurrence, is that, for example, we had the talk from Akash and how Arun was saying that his father is a photographer, and I also have a knack for photography, right? So one thing that I've noticed is with designers, even if it's not directly something as close to as sketching, which we often associate it to, they are like somewhat creative in a different way. Someone's interested in a dance form, someone really has an ear for music, so you would find the creative factor originating from some or the other source. But apart from that, I'd seen that the two aspects, right, which we all talked about, the visual side of it and the analytical side of it, like having the eye for seeing if something is slightly off. That I think something, it's very good if there's that thing is present in a designer, but with more and more tools coming in, like especially things like auto layout, right? These things can be automated. They don't need to be there anymore. And even like things like if that color is one shade off, for example, my own flatmate, he's a designer and he is also colorblind, and he doesn't tell this to a lot of people, and it might come as a surprise, right? How can a designer be colorblind, right?
I can be a designer too. Then.
Exactly that.
Wow.
So
Okay.
all these tools,
So I
like
wasn't wrong.
the
Anyway.
tokens that Tanisha is talking about, the design tokens, etc. These kind of things get solved nowadays. So like all your design systems have the color. You don't have to really look for it until a few particular things. So I would say the taste part which Akash talked about, that is something which I would say still comes from within a lot. So it's rather helpful if you have a very tasteful person. Now, taste doesn't necessarily need to mean that it has to be a very sleek looking object or anything very lavish, but it can be just simplicity or minimalism, like Arun was talking about. But the visual aspect or how things should be aligned, the basic principles of grouping, I think that part can definitely be taught.
Okay. And that is why these automations are coming
Exactly.
in, because they're trainable.
Exactly.
Right? So
Those are
why train men when you can train machines?
exactly.
Right.
And I think designer used to have that this one instinct, like they have this capacity. That's why they change their role. I mean, many people. I've seen a lot of designers, like more than 50-60% designers, are from different. They started their journey from different segment, but they turned out to the designer because they realized like, okay, this is what I meant for. So yes,
But then,
creativity
do you
was
think
there.
right? But do you think, since you're talking about automation and you're talking about trainable, these little things that are trainable, do you think automating all of these or leaving them to machines? Let's talk about design systems. Do not quote me, please, for what I'm about to say. But do you think it's going to hamper the abilities of future designers that are coming in?
I was in fact thinking about that. In fact, when this was presented that everything is automatically defined and now you have tokens and you just need to remember a particular token number or whatever that you need to just include in your designs. Right? Like, yeah, fair enough. This particular shadow is already defined. It's some 300 or 400 or whatever, right? Fair, it does. I wouldn't say that it hampers, let's say, a growth of a designer, but I would definitely see it as maybe it won't let you challenge the status quo often, right? Maybe you might not challenge the look and feel of it as often as you would have, let's say, if these were not defined. But again, neither can I say that let's just not have all of them and then just hamper our productivity either, right? So over there, I'd like to go back to design leaders and design managers and saying that you figure out when and at what particular point do you need to push the boundary a little, right? Ask for a little more from the designer, right? Challenge, ask the right questions a little more often, and where it absolutely makes sense, and not just be happy with what they provide. Right? So it's a very gray zone, right? Like, we can't just say yes, it definitely affects neither, just completely scrap it off. It has its pros and cons. As long as designers are able to challenge things, come back with a lot more visual directions and creative solutions and like give me the like. I somehow think that every one of us should often think, what if we give the best experience possible for our customers, right? And if there is some answer that you can pursue, why not?
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So, talking about this, obviously, it's your own perspective where you say that, okay, well, it doesn't really help or it doesn't really hamper at all, but it's somewhere a person needs to make a decision where they want to push the boundaries or not. Which brings me to my next question. So, when you talk about this mentality, when you talk about this mindset that you need, and when you try to establish this mindset within a team, say a team of 10 people, 15 people that you are now leading, how do you do that? How do you convey ideas? Or, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say in the rawest form is, how do you manage collaboration between teams of people who are so versatile, who look at the same thing from different perspectives, right? I mean, it's bound to bring up some sort of clash or something of that sort. So how do you guys manage those teams? I don't know if you'd like to take that.
It's a super interesting question, especially I'm not sure how many of you, had the opportunity to set up a team and work with a particular team, right? Because on one hand, you need to kind of manage what kind of talent are you bringing into the team. How close are they to your current team, and how different are they to your current team? There should be a right balance over there, right? I can't just have every single person who likes the same kind of quality and has the exact same design, because I'll be stuck with them, right? The same quality will just come. I'm not saying that the quality is bad, but nobody will challenge anything for me for, let's say, years to come, right? But at the same time, if I have everyone chaotic on the team, I'll probably be stuck with people who are just questioning every single thing at every single point in time. Because in the world of building great startups and great products, someone at some place and at some time has to disagree and commit.
Right.
You would,
Right.
I see
Yeah.
you laughing a lot
Yeah.
more on that, right? And that's where we, as creative people, not just designers, even marketeers, content writers, people who are a lot more creative, a lot more subjectivity where it comes into the picture, we do not know where to draw a boundary, right? So you need to have a mix of both, like a person who can easily identify that this is something where I'll go with the status quo. I'm not going to challenge anything. I'll use the existing design system. I'll use the existing industry standards UX over here. Everyone's using a radio button over here. I'm going to blindly use that over here, right? But you also need them to come back to you and challenge that. Fair. Why should we use a radio button over here? Can we think of something else?
Right.
And if you're able to take that call, keeping in mind again the same resources that we talked about on time, bandwidth of your people, how valid is the problem statement and all. Because a lot of times I do see people putting tons of effort into something that was never validated shooting in the dark, right? You would put some 6 months of time and then the product dies the second day it goes live, right? And on the other hand, we do see the other side also, where you're very clear on the problem statement, where you have to put a lot of effort to solve it in the right way, but you go in the mentality of let's fail fast and you just fall face down. Right? Where people were actually expecting great quality from you, you just did something that is very textbook norm up there, and then your product never scaled up. Right? So you need to balance that in your team, where you have all the right kind of skills in the team and they're leveling up when it comes to these skills. And this is where over communication kind of helps, right? This is where I always say that don't communicate, over communicate every little thing. And this is something that you've mentioned in your earlier question also, that designers have this innate ability to come to the right answers, but most of the times when you put them at the spot, they're not able to answer.
Right.
So document it. Right? So at Razorpay, we follow this practice where just like a product manager gives you a product spec, I want every designer to write a design spec. Whatever calls that you're taking, write it down for me. Whatever assumptions you're taking, write it down for me, and do mention how you're going to test it at a later stage. Right? This not just helps you in keeping a documentation out of it, keeping a log out of it, so that you know these answers, but also, in a future date when you come back to that, you know exactly what you've done and what you've gone through and how you've built that. Right?
I think it also helps in this sort of establishing a justification behind why everybody thinks how they think.
Yeah.
And helps you understand, okay, well, if we have 5 different options and if everybody is rooting for it, according to the vision of the product that we're trying to build, what fits the best, and then I think that justification can bring everybody on the same page.
Exactly. It just acts as a source of truth for you.
Right.
So that has been absolutely helpful at least.
Right. Yeah. Akash, how's it been at Athena Health for you?
I think, as I mentioned, diversity in thoughts is really important when you are in a team. That gonna challenge a lot of things which you are building or designing. If there is no one who gonna question you, then you are in a wrong team, I think. And if that is not happening, then there is something serious wrong with the dynamics of your team. So I think, and also I was trained as like asking questions a lot. If you are not asking questions, that means you are not putting that much of efforts into what you are trying to solve, because you don't have that much of data. And definitely, whatever the solution which you will come up with, that will be based on assumptions and not the reality which is out there. So, and if and that's why I always feel that there should be people around you who are gonna question everything which you do. Doesn't matter at what position they are sitting, and if that is happening with you, then you are in a very good team and you're gonna grow a lot. And as a designer, you always should be you always have that acceptance of that somebody going to challenge your design, and with training and time you understand how to answer those questions. And I think, yeah, that helps a lot when you grow. Even if you are a junior designer, your managers or the senior people will ask you questions. When you are a senior or managing design manager, the juniors gonna ask you questions like why we are doing this, why this feature, why this design decision. And then as a designer, we should be articulate our answers in a very much better and crisp way. I think that's the biggest skill designers should have.
Right. Aditya, your views?
Sure, I think like the same two wonderful people who've spoken, I think their views are very coherent. And just about asking questions, on that note, I've realized that sometimes you have to also ask people to ask questions, because it doesn't come to a lot of people innately. Especially in my team, like someone, especially this is a problem when you're in a remote environment. Like a lot of people have this tendency to go on mute, and while you're communicating, they probably would be saying something, but they don't even realize that they're on mute. So you have to nudge them slightly that, hey, what do you think about this? Yeah. Even though if you are fairly certain you've gotten everybody on board, you need to make sure that they are questioning it as well. So that's something I think which is the same thing which I was trying to tell in my talk as well, that you need to encourage designers to ask more questions, even if they seem extremely stupid, even if they seem like you are kind of questioning your PM's ideas, even if it seems like you're pushing them to the edge, ask them and make sure that you are on the same level as they are as well. And in the same way, like I think was Arun was mentioning, the idea about making sure that you document all your design decisions. Along with it, something which I was speaking about earlier was also like, especially in smaller teams, the context of the problems also keeps changing. Like while solving the problem, you realize that, well, while solving this way, we might also solve another problem that we've been having for a while. So it also makes sense to make sure that the changing context is also logged, so that you don't miss the things which are there in the middle. So mainly, I think over communication is a great example. Making sure that you do as much talk as you can asynchronously as well. Maybe someone's not right there to read all maybe speak what you were listening to. But if you can just write up that extra piece of justification on a Slack thread, if you can just record a Loom video explaining your designs, as simple as that, it just helps so much to maintain the context.
But then again, obviously, over communicating, as you made a very good point, is very important, and encouraging people to ask questions or just at least speak what's on their mind is also extremely important. But I think this question comes from more of a management perspective rather than being a designer and all of that. And I think this is the right place to ask this as well. So when you're encouraging people to speak their mind, where and how do you realize that, okay, well, now I'm being pushy, right? So how do you guys understand that?
You mean pushy in the sense like from a managerial perspective?
From a, perhaps a managerial perspective, say for example, you find yourself in a situation where you're like, okay, I want to know what you think, but I just get no answers, and like, well, I'd like to hear what you say, and then the person would be like, okay, stop asking me questions. I don't have anything to say, you know. So how do you get to that point, and how do you understand that, okay, well, this is the line that I do not need to step over?
Oh, for me, I think this answer might upset a lot of people. I don't think that line should exist. Right? Let me just quickly ask a question. Right? Given an option to sit in a silo and design something great for the next 2 hours versus sitting in a room with a bunch of product managers, fighting with them and then designing something along with them, what would you pick? How many of you would pick A, design in a silo, sitting somewhere, aram say, listening to your own music, having all the problems listed down, sketching some things? Don't lie.
I think it's a lot of people just not raising their hands.
Yeah.
Encourage them.
Sometimes
Raise their hands.
Please do. Nothing wrong in that. Nothing wrong in that. Please do. I am one of them, by the way. Give me a room. I'm gonna, go sit silently, design something great, and come back. But I'm guessing the others would have raised a hand, where you would sit, fight with a PM or an engineer, and then come back. Don't lie. Fair, right? So, which designer would I pick? I would pick the second one. Keeping that in mind, I would say that there's no line where you're crossing someone. I don't think there's any line here to cross in putting someone at a spot and then just asking their opinions about something, right? As far as you're not asking something that is absolutely ridiculous,
Sure.
By the end of the day, you're building something great for your consumer.
Right.
You might come with your own thoughts. I am coming with my own.
Right.
Nothing wrong in putting them on a paper or just talking to someone.
Megha, how's it been for you working with so many different
I think
people?
they have already explained the same thing. So it's all about like communication. Just keep communicating. Throw your ideas. That's why we have this whiteboard. Okay,
Right.
dump your ideas there. Write whatever you can think of, and then pick each of the items, discuss, and find out the solution. Write it down. I mean, narrow it down. Let's say. Then only the solution comes in. The problem statement comes from everywhere. Diversity is what we have already discussed. So that's how it actually collaborates. Yes, obviously in this hybrid model, remote culture, we were finding it little difficult, but we tried to manage it very well. I think with Figma file itself, we were discussing over there, and we were trying to find out the solution on that itself. So this is the way, but you have to encourage people as well to talk, because someone, if someone is junior, the one who is starting it, they might feel like, okay, my ideas, I don't know how people will react on this. They'll say how I'm stupid about whatever question I'm asking and all. I was that kind of person. I was that. But later I got to know, nahi, this is not the way you should do your work. You should throw your ideas first of all. It doesn't matter how small or how big it is. Just talk, and you will find a solution. And in our design review call as well, we identify, okay, just we are demonstrating whatever we have done after the discussion as well. whatever we have done, there are some loopholes that we can improve more. So yes, again, the talk and collaboration things, that's very important.
Well, I think the important point to take away from this one particular discussion is that if you do have any kind of ideas as a designer, be it as stupid as it may, there's somebody out there who's going to hear it out and probably do something about it. So never think that any of the ideas that you have is too subpar or too stupid, right? Because that is how greatness is built. And this also gives me the encouragement and the confidence because I have a lot of stupid ideas about our website.
Yes.
I've already been laughed at, but I'm still going to throw them out there.
So we always fight for that.
We always fight about it, right? So I think we know what we're talking about.
Just a quick thing on that, like since you're saying that how do you not cross the line, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes let's say that if you want to take someone's opinion and you don't want to make it very binary, so better idea is to give them a prompt to like what do you not instead of saying what do you think about this, just tell them the idea itself and ask them what is the opinion about the idea so that they have a little more context to think of. So some people are like they can think instantly really well, but some people need a bit of help.
Right.
So give them that extra prompt, help them out in the thinking process, and that often turns out very helpful.
It's actually a very good point. There's something that I personally felt as well that there are some people, a very small percentage, who are very quick with their thinking and come up with great ideas, understand what they need to do right away. But then some people need to sit on it for some time.
Exactly.
I think it's very important for us to give them that space. Fantastic point. Right. So towards the last leg of the discussion that we are having today, we are going to be talking about some of the difficult things. I hope you're ready for that. And the most difficult thing for a designer, in my opinion, is handling criticism.
Exactly.
Right. So, Megha, I'll start with you this time. As a designer, let's not talk about you as a team lead. Let's not talk about you as a director. Let's talk about you as a designer. How do you handle criticism?
Toughest part, obviously. I mean, instead of if you have done something, instead of getting appreciation, you are getting criticism. So that always put you down. But what I learned is like you should not take the criticism personally. That's one thing. Second, like you should need to understand why it is coming. Okay, what exactly they are trying to point out. I mean, no one can come and say like I didn't like your design. Okay,
Right.
they must say like what exactly you didn't like. Okay, or what is your perspective. So try to understand what they are coming from and what they are thinking, or what they want to put in here. So make those pointers for your improvements, but also whatever design you have created, you must have some thinking behind it. You must have done your research before you put that on the screen. So I mean, you should also offend it a bit. Like, okay, take this is what my problem statement, and this is how I am thinking. That's the solution I reached to based on my these research. So that's the documentation part. What we have already talked about. That is very essential at that time. Explaining this to justification. Yes, justification you have to give. But yes, as again, idea comes from anywhere. So even in the criticism, you can get this. So take it positively. Obviously, that's what I can say.
Right.
But don't I mean, demotivate. I mean, it's not about someone is asking. I mean, someone is complaining about your design thing or something. It's just about their thought. You should take this down, validate it, whether it is essential to take this in your design, or then only take. I mean, it should be your call. And as a designer, it should be your call, like whether you are taking this criticism to a conversion of the design, or you are just ignoring it based on your research again.
Right. Right. So
This one.
research is important. Justification.
Obviously, justification is
Reasons,
important.
valid reasons behind taking a decision is important. You started out as a freelancer, right?
Yeah.
And you were your own man, you were your own team, and you did everything on your own, and then you transitioned into being in a team, and then handling a team, and then managing so much. How did your mindset change in terms of taking criticism? Because I'm sure that when you're working as a freelancer, you start out, there's not much feedback that's coming in, and then once you start in a team, there's suddenly a lot of feedback channels that open up.
Exactly.
So how is your journey been, and how did you manage all of that?
Sure. So I'd like to preface this with one of my favorite movies and a line from that. So my favorite movie is Fight Club. There's a line in that movie which says, "You are not your job." In the same way, I think it's very important for every designer to realize that you are not your designs. You need to separate yourself from your work. And this is a very generalist advice that you can apply to other things as well. So, especially like you, since you brought up the freelance point, the point about freelance is that mostly you're just talking to the founder or whoever you're driving the project with.
Right.
Whereas once you start working in an actual team where the product goes through multiple iterations, you get to hear from the customers. And a team would give you both the perspectives. You'd hear feedback from your product managers and then from the customers. And that won't be the direct way, of course. They wouldn't tell you what's wrong. They will just not be able to do the same actions which you've defined. So one thing which is extremely helpful is to instead let that feedback come through customers. Now, of course, that's a longer feedback loop. It's slightly difficult to close because you need to push those designs out and then get that feedback. But again, the same idea applies that if you've designed something, it is, of course, something you do with a lot of heart and soul. So it's an extension of your personality. But at least it's very important to analyze and understand that that's not the end. That's not you. That's just something you've made, and you can, of course, do better. Everybody can do better all the time. That's all in design, right? We don't define efficiency like we do with code. There's no time complexity or space complexity. So those are a few things which have worked in my favor, basically, to somehow let the feedback come through customers instead of just one person. And a lot of times separate myself from my work. I think that's also an ideology which works very well in the West. Here we are very, very obsessed with our jobs. We almost introduce ourselves as, hey, I am A and I work at B.
Right.
Whereas if you go outside, they just treat their job as a small part of their lives. So I think that's something we are learning together as a community. But yeah, that's okay.
Right. Good points there. Obviously, culture has a part to play in it, but I think the fact of the matter was that at a point where uh, I mean, it's also important to understand what kind of feedback you're getting in. I mean, you cannot just open yourself to all kinds of noise that's out there, right? And I think it's a person's ability to understand certain situations where they understand what is constructive and what is not. I think that's also something that needs a very fine. There's a very fine division between it, but I think that's also something that people need to learn to identify. Akash, running a team, doing everything from a criticism standpoint, how do you handle all of these things, and how does the team react to moments where there's a lot of constructive feedback that's coming in, and a lot of changes have to happen? I'd love to know.
I think involve your team at the very, very initial stage of your design process helps a lot. That way, you basically designing collectively and everyone is involved in that design process helps a lot because then that criticism is not binary. Whether they mazani aya wala feedback won't come at all because they know how the process happened, what are those assumptions which we had, what are those data points, which user gave us this feedback, why they give feedback, and if we, as Arun said, over communicating with them that why we are doing this and why it is designed this way. If we communicate that and if we involve them, then I don't think there will be a criticism at all. There will be a good feedback coming in uh, from your stakeholders and your team.
Hmm. Right, right. Arun, your views on this entire thing?
I think I've learned it the hard way to get my popcorn to all these meetings.
Okay.
Jokes aside, see, the thing that irks most of the designers is again what panel has already spoke about, right? I've put so much effort into something. How can someone just raise a finger at this particular thing? Uh, but I'd again go back to, while there's a lot of values on culture that I can talk about, I just want to talk about how should designers treat feedback, right? I'm not calling it criticism. I'm consciously not calling it criticism. Instead of giving all the gyan about how should you take it, how should you not take it, and all of it, let's just discuss what generally happens out there, right? So first of all, there are two levels of feedback. One is something that you should definitely take. One is something that you should just forget. Like, what, this doesn't make sense, right? So the first thing that you need to know is identify what to take and what not to take. Now, in the ones that you need to take, there are again two levels, which unfortunately for design being subjective, there's subjective feedback and then there's objective feedback, right? Objective feedback goes something like this, right? I don't think I can open my users might not be able to open this bottle cap because of the way it is structured. Right? That's an objective feedback, right? I don't think this bottle looks beautiful yet. That's a subjective feedback, right? So you need to know how to tackle both, right? Subjective feedback is where no amount of justification might work, right? If someone like me enters the room, I'll be the loudest. I'll just prove my point. I'll go back. You might not win, right? Or on the other hand, I might just learn about something new and then I'll go back, right? That you can't just promise the situation when it comes to this subjective feedback. Subjective feedback is where your brand, your voice and tone, your visual styles, your palettes, and all of these kind of come into the picture. But again, I can't just say that we've always been, this shade of blue. Why not just use this shade of blue? That's a stupid argument, right? Like it doesn't prove anything. It's still subjective by the end of the day. So over there, someone has to disagree. Who's disagreeing depends on who's kind of dealing that situation, right? Objective feedback is where we should ace, and a lot of times we do not, because we consider that as subjective feedback also. Right? Oh, you're not able to open this bottle cap. I think you're stupid.
Maybe you're doing it.
Maybe you're doing it wrong. Our users, you should try it harder, right? Yeah. Maybe we should talk to the industrial designer and see, what they can do. Yeah. The moment you do not treat your objective feedback as objective feedback, you're going wrong over there. How do you deal it is something that, Aditya has kind of mentioned in a very clear way, where you do not shoot the messenger. Shoot the message. Right? Put it down on a piece of paper and fight if that's actually making sense or not, rather than seeing where is it coming from. Right? And in all of this, again, going back, over communication absolutely helps.
Right. I mean, obviously that makes a lot of sense. But then if you go on the flip side of the coin, right, understanding subjective and objective. And by the way, you've made this very objective. I have to give you that. Put it very, very well. But if you look at the flip side of the coin, you look at it from a designer's perspective in terms of, well, say somebody who's found themselves in a position where they're sure of the fact that this is going to work. And then you get into that mode where you want to defend what you've done in front of people, right? So considering all of these different feedback that they are being subjected to, when do you think it's right for a designer to stand up and defend what they have done instead of again being very open towards feedback, subjective, objective feedback, versus being closed, and then there's that middle point where you know that you've done something right and you want to defend it. So what's that boundary like?
Well, if you're absolutely sure that whatever that you're suggesting is going to help increase something for the business, right? This is something I've been trying to figure out. I don't have a concrete answer yet as to how do I measure subjective design also. Right? While on the objective side, you do have a lot of metrics around, what's the conversion like, what's the drop-offs like, etc. What is the lifetime value of my customer just because I'm doing something a little more subjective? Just maybe, giving a couple of extra weeks for my final visual touches or, that fancy animation or whatever, right? If one day I figure it out, I want to put something on that. But yeah, so as long as you're very sure that whatever that I'm suggesting right now makes sense to build it in the right time using all the resources that I have, it's going to impact my OKR in the right way, I'd say designers should do it, right? And this is another competency that we do test at Razorpay, where in most of the interviews you would see me giving some very wrong design feedback just to see if you're able to come to me or not, right? Because you will find a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders who do not understand design but have a lot of opinions, right? Same goes for marketing also. I'll go back and say that the way that you're launching the iPhone is absolutely pathetic. Right? I might not know anything about go-to-market strategies, but it's visible, I'll go do that, right? I'll never go to an engineer and say that I think you should use a different function over here. I'll never do that. I don't think engineering managers do that either.
Right.
Because you do not see that in function. There's nothing to kind of look and feel and then give a feedback on that, right? So in all of this, while taking feedback is one thing that everyone should learn, training others to give you the feedback in the right way is also something that everyone should learn.
That's a very good point. Right. Megha, what could you say about this? Defending design.
Defending the design.
Yes.
I think I've already spoken about it.
Yeah.
So yes, sometimes it requires to defend our design because we have done, we have some evidence. We have researched about it, so we know that this doesn't work. So we won't include it. And if someone is asking to include it, just because they want it, it doesn't make sense, right? We have this evidence like, okay, the user doesn't like this, and they have this feedback on the app store or wherever you can get. So just show them, just let them know, like, this is my research and this is how I reached to this point. So again, conveying your opinion to someone is not a bad thing. It's always a good thing to say, if you have the solid reason, if you have the solid justification.
But also depends on how you say it.
But yes, it should
You don't
always
just put the stick
should
down and you
obviously
say,
be
no,
done
you're
differently.
wrong, I'm right, go with this, or I
And,
walk out.
Or
and
maza nahi aaya.
this is
Maza nahi aaya, right.
The
Those
H word.
thing actually should not be there, definitely, man.
Right.
So that, though, I mean, anybody should learn, like, okay, this is not the way to give a feedback to anyone, right? That's the thing. Maybe another thing could be, when we have this design, even though we are defending it, we should listen to the other perspective as well. Maybe somewhere, somehow, we are missing it out some point. So obviously, as a designer, we have to keep our ears, eyes open every time. We have to grab everything whatever is coming to us. So that used to be helpful always. So that requires, you need to make a point. But yes, if you are if you are presenting a design to a stakeholder, or say whoever you are presenting, you should explain it in a way that, okay, this is my problem statement, this is the problem statement I have taken, and based on my these data and this evidence, I am thinking this is the proposed solution that I believe it's going to work. So in that way, if you're presenting it, maybe it is more meaningful for them, so they can understand, they can relate it.
So
That's the thing.
the designer can just cut the call if the other person, the manager says ki maza nahi aaya, even after you
Obviously.
give all the evidence.
Obviously, you
It's
can.
fair that
It's
to
fair.
Maza nahi aaya is something that I absolutely love these days. I think in my entire experience, I've gone from a very non-confrontational person to लड़ाई कहाँ चल रहा है हो जाना है right? Because it's so fascinating that when people say मजा नहीं आया, and when you kind of dig deeper, you understand something about
क्यों नहीं आया?
क्यों नहीं, अरे बता ना क्या चाहिए.
Right.
This recently I
But
was.
even I used to do this sometime. I mean, my designers, please forgive me if I do something wrong. I mean, I get some designs, okay, maybe a poster design or something. If I don't like it much, then I try to say, can we try something else?
Right.
So this is the way to convey you.
Right.
ये नहीं
But
कह
I
सकते कि I
can't
didn't like
exactly
this, right?
put my finger on it, but maza nahi aaya.
I love that feedback. I absolutely love that feedback.
Yeah. You were saying something.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
recently we were designing a screen where the user, we were just revamping the screen where you enter your name as a user. And the screens before that were extremely colorful because we hired a new illustrator and they were making really nice illustrations. And on that screen, there's literally nothing else. There's just an input box and saying, hey, we'd love to know you more. So the PM goes, ki yaar, is screen mein na, and I knew he was going to say that maza nahi aaya. I'm like, ha. I know what you mean. We are working on it. But technically, उसमें उतना मजा आना भी नहीं चाहिए. It's just they're entering the name. Sometimes you have to just go on that. And about that point which you're saying, that how do you defend your designs? I think that is something also which comes more with time. I think I don't generalize here, but in my experience, mostly what I've noticed, designers are somewhat shy. They are those people who would like sit in the corner quietly, and they'll be like, "Dekho, mujhe requirement bata do. I'll just give you the designs. I'll make a really nice design and give you." And nobody likes to. I mean, as much as we saw people not raising hands, nobody actually likes to have that argument, right? But that you sometimes over the years and years you sort of learn. Even when I had joined the team initially, they would just tell me, "Ki yaar, Aditya button badal do," and I'll be like, "ठीक है, badal do." I'm like, "Okay."
Is that really how it is?
Yeah.
Designers in the
I
house.
mean, I can
That happens all the
relate.
time.
It happens.
So
When you're starting, this is how it works.
and then somewhat of things which can help is like if you can make some of that subjectivity into objective things. For example, if you're talking about colors, you can actually tell them that this particular shade of color that I have, if the text I'm putting on that color meets a certain WCG standard, which will mean that it will be more accessible, then they will know कि अच्छा हाँ, he has brought in a number, which means that he's trying to say something कि वो user will find it accessible. Or if like I'm making a button so small that it's beyond the touch area of a user, they will not be able to type it despite it being there.
Right.
So make as much of that subjectivity into objectivity when possible. That is somewhat helpful. And then I would just say advocate for your designs, advocate for your designers. If you are the one who is a little more vocal in your team and you know that some of your teammates are not as vocal, teach them and also advocate for them. That usually is very good practice.
Very fine line between advocacy and defiance.
Aha.
I think we need to put that out there.
Absolutely.
Akash, how's your experience been with these things?
I think I take feedback when I start my presentation with I think this looks good or I think this will work instead of I know this will work. So that I know in my mind that whatever I have designed is based on my assumptions or based on the data or I have confidence on that. And that helps a lot for me to take the feedback and to ask more questions. So whenever someone comes with the feedback, uh, the way I defend is I ask questions like, okay, you think so, but why do you think so? On what basis or what is your assumptions? Did you talk to any user about this who have mentioned about this problem? Uh, if they're coming with all the answers, then you don't know much, right? As a designer, then you take that feedback and you try to implement those things. I think being open at a certain thing for the feedback is really important. Also, it is very important to say no or to defend your designs when you really know, when you have done your research. And also as a designer, your track record matters, like at how many times you said that this is going to work and that worked, right? Then you get that seat on the table that if Aditya is saying that this is going to work, that means this will work because he has that track record, he have that uh, way of working. So I think all these factors matters a lot while defending your designs or advocating for your designs and your team. And also culture, like as people mentioned, that it is also very important that people should understand that this is their expertise, and they should understand where their expertise begin and at what level they should be giving the feedback. So yeah.
So, based on historical evidence, should also be a factor. That's
Yes.
what you're saying.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
That's the unfortunate case. In a very utopian scenario, that should not exist, but that humans, by the end of the day, you do judge on, अरे एक टाइम कुछ ने ये बोला था वो तो काम ही नहीं किया.
Right.
That's the case, unfortunately.
Well, great. At this point, we still have like 5 more minutes, so I'd like to open the panel to all of you guys. I know I'm going against the grain here, but this is a space where you can talk about things that you want to talk about with these guys. Ask your questions. The entire panel is open now. So if anybody has anything that they'd like to ask, go for it. Yes?
Yeah, so one more thing I think, apart from criticism, is when designers get overwhelmed, right, by the other designers, the entire community. There's a lot of stuff out there on LinkedIn. So how do you deal with the overwhelming part?
First step, stop using LinkedIn.
Obvious. Not LinkedIn, I'm sorry. Not LinkedIn.
Please go ahead. Yeah. So how do you stop yourself from overwhelm?
Not stop, like, I mean, I think it's good to get overwhelmed at times because you level up by looking at the community, but sometimes it gets too much, right? So how do you deal with that part?
I think what he's trying to ask is if you are just subjected to so many things that are out there, much like all the other media that's on the internet.
True.
Some you like, some you don't, some you think that hey, people are so much better than me.
Yeah.
What am I even doing here? So
Yeah.
how do you manage that?
Yeah, so I think the same thing which you told, right? Sometimes it's a good thing, which is definitely the case. Like sometimes it pushes you to push yourself beyond that. So recently, like when I'd see a few of my peers designing a really great flow, I'll be like, wow, man, this is really cool. Could I have thought of this way? That level of detail, that level of craft. But at the same time, there are so many apps out there with fanciest of animations, all sorts of micro interactions, great photographs, everything. It is a world of information overload, and it is very natural for that to happen. So you kind of need to justify in a case that, like, if you want to implement some of that into your own work, is it the right time to do so? Because every product has a cycle of maturity, right? On day one, if you're doing 5 things and you're doing each of them poorly, then it doesn't make any sense. And you can't do all of them very well as well. So maybe try to get at the core first, try to fix that, and then grow from there one by one. But apart from that, I think One good other thing that I've seen is that a lot of people, like let's say if you're working at a service-based company where you're working on service design, then you can't use a very fancy animation there, right? It's a product made for SaaS, for example, B2B products. Then how do you fulfill your creative ambition there? A good way to do so is to start a side project, right? Work with a few friends of yours where you're working on a social platform, you're working on something which is more Gen Z. Fulfill your creative ambition on something else than only your work. That could be an alternative.
Arun? There's a classic imposter syndrome. Right? यार मुझे कुछ भी नहीं आता. How the hell did they hire me? And I think I'm gonna get fired tomorrow. Very natural to have. First of all, I do empathize with you, and great that you kind of came up and asked this question. I'm 100% sure most of you have this question, but it's a very tricky spot to ask this question also, because you're fundamentally doubting yourself. Right? These questions are natural. First of all, everyone has their fair share of it. Something that I tweeted recently also is I had my fair share of it. So early on, I used to go to Harshal, the co-founder of RaisePay, super close friend of mine. I'm like, Harshal, I don't know why you hired me. You know what? मुझे कुछ भी नहीं आता. मैं ये सब पहली बार कर रहा हूँ. Right? Also, taking the liberty to use Hindi. Sorry for that. Harshal this one day got frustrated and said, "हम भी startup पहली बार कर रहे हैं." A lot of times, you are in this weird zone of imposter syndrome primarily because you fundamentally feel that there's someone out there who's far better than you, who's well suited for this job that you're doing. Right? You're just being a fake imposter. This is again and this is outside design also. अरे मुझे गाड़ी चलाना नहीं आता. Have you ever tried? अरे मुझे ये animation करना नहीं आता. Have you ever tried? So just forget these things. Just give some great thought to what you're doing. Make sure that what you are as of today is something that is far better than what you were, let's say, last year. Right? Put some self OKRs on yourself. See how you're personally growing. Could be anything, right? Like for me, growth at a point was salary. For me, growth at a point was designation. These days, it's about how is my team growing? How are they efficient? How is my company's valuation growing? What other things apart from design am I doing? Right? So put some personal OKRs on, maybe give it a shot, put it for a quarter and see how you, the quarter two just started, like financial year, the quarter two started with
it's the right time.
Right time,
Right
put
time.
it up, see how you're different in September. Let's see what life has for you.
Right.
Put these thoughts aside here and stop comparing yourself with someone else. Compare yourself with you. Are you able to do better and faster designs? Are you able to take better and faster judgments or not? That itself is growth for you. And it's a very small community we have. Right? So take advantage of that community as well. Talk to people. Over communicate again.
Everything boils down to that. I think from what I can gather, imposter syndrome comes from the fact that you are looking at yourself as another face in the crowd. Like Arun obviously and Aditya both of them said, I think it's very important for a person to understand that you cannot do everything at once. And need to take everything one step at a time. And when you do that, you fundamentally do not have the time or the brain space to look at others and see what they're doing, because you're so focused on doing what you want to do for yourself, be it one step at a time. Say you want to improve, say in terms of design, I'm going to new things, okay, please. But say you want to improve your understanding of colors, you want to improve your understanding of shapes, you want to improve your understanding of what kind of design fits what scene. Now you cannot be expected to learn all of that at once, right? You cannot just get up one morning and say that, wow, I know all of this. Great, that's 3 steps ahead in my life. Let's move forward. You don't do that. You take every step one step at a time. So I think that's something that's very important for all of us to learn, not just the designers in the house, or not just as designers, but as people, as human beings, as uh, all the other roles that you play in the society. That it has to be done one step at a time. You cannot lift the burden of the weight of the world on your shoulders at once. I mean, even for that, you'll have to squat a lot, right? So I think that's another way that you can think about it and probably combat it up to a certain level. It might creep in at those times. I'd say sleep on it. just go to sleep, forget everything else, and you'll be right as rain next morning.
So I'm probably going a little philosophical. It feels funny that I'm going philosophical. So a lot of times imposter syndrome comes because the question that you have is, will I be able to do it? Right? Will I be able to do it is a question of self-doubt. How will I be able to do it is a question of growth mindset. Yeah, right. So just replace your questions here. Like the questions that you ask yourself are super important, and the tone in which that you ask are very important. This I've learned the hard way.
Akash?
I think there is a small video about from Era Glass about taste talent gap. Uh, just go and watch it once. Every creative person go through this of imposter syndrome, or like for a very lifetime, even if you are a design manager or at a higher stage. Uh, your taste is at somewhere here and your talent is somewhere here, and this is the gap which frustrates us, that I'm not able to do this because you're comparing yourself with the designer who is like 10, 12 years of experience or doing some great stuff. And that is when it comes in. I always say that just keep patience and keep practicing on your craft, and it will happen. And it happens, it really happens. Just be at it, just keep doing what you're doing, and grow every year, every month, and assess yourself. This is where that documentation and all those things comes into picture, that how you used to take decisions a year ago and how you're doing it now. So yeah, that helps. And most of the time this comes in early in your career, when you're like 3 or 4 years into your career. This happens a lot. It happened with me. I used to cut down myself, go out, do photography or something like that, come back refreshed, start again. So that also helps. But it's very obvious. It's not something. It's very normal. You're not going through anything different, or there is something wrong. It's absolutely normal. This is what happens, and it happened with all of us. So yeah.
One quick hack I think I'd love to share, since you digressed into imposter syndrome, which is also a very great topic, is something called a brag dog. So brag dog is a very simple concept where, throughout the course of your career, there are multiple times when you'd be appreciated, like a nice flow that you've made, nicely defended a good argument in design. And as human beings, we are just creatures who just looks at imperfections more than perfections. We are just like that. We're engineered that way. If something is off, it is way more noticeable than if something is great. Because of that very fact, we often tend to give more emphasis on our lack of things than what we actually have. And at times, whenever you feel low or whenever you feel that self-doubt which I was talking about, the great idea is to look back at that dog and look at all the times when you've excelled. That will kind of reinforce that self-belief that you have, that if you could do it then, why not you can do it tomorrow, right? You are the same person. You can absolutely take a good stab at it again.
Fantastic point. We have time for one more question. Anybody? Yep. Go for it.
So it's a short question, and you don't need to explain. So one book, one app, and one movie that you will recommend.
One app, movie, and the what's the
One
first
app, one book, and one movie
book?
that you will recommend.
Who shall we start with?
Mega. One app, one book, one movie.
Movie, I'm not sure.
Okay.
One book that design related, or like in general. Okay. Okay. Actually, I'll say design one only. The sprint I recently, not recently, it's been quite years back. Sprint book, the sprint that I learned, and and it immediately actually shift my, design thinking to something else. There, the 5 days design sprint that I learned there. So that was the book that actually immediately changed my mindset too. So that's why I like that a lot. Um, Other than that, there are many, but I have to name one. So I'll just skip this. App. I'm actually a little bit. I mean, I don't use app much, but yes, the very first app that I like is just thinking which to name.
Take your time. Take your time.
Nay, for designers, the very simple, minimal, I'll say this thing. What do you say? The Google my inbox.
Gmail.
That
Gmail.
Gmail. That actually that's what I use a lot. So and it's very user friendly for me. So I use that a lot. Maybe you guys can answer.
Arun?
Superhuman is a mail client that I absolutely love. Just made my mail flows far better. One is that. On the movie side, I don't have any particular movie as such, but I really like the concepts where you're challenging the status quo a lot. For example, the recent The Boys, the series, right, where superheroes go rogue.
Fantastic.
It's a very interesting take on how like you're used to seeing some things in a very normal linear way. So these things I absolutely love. On the book, I have many, uh, but if you can get your hands on elements of style, it's a very no bullshit book about how do you write and speak the right English. It's just beautiful. It's a very handy book. Like I'd in fact recommend everyone to just carry it in your pockets. It's that great for work.
Is it that small?
Mm, Depends on how big of a pocket you have.
Okay.
Or get the ebook version.
Sure.
Okay. What about you?
I'm a big movie fan, so I'm going to start with that. As I was saying earlier, Fight Club is my favorite movie, and it's also kind of on the similar theme. You do challenge the status quo that society follows. App-wise, I'd say Twitter, purely because that's the only social networking app I use. I don't use Instagram, LinkedIn, not at all. And
Once every 2 months.
sorry,
Once every 2 months.
once every 2 year more.
Every 2 years.
Because like I'd be probably active on LinkedIn when I want a job, like if
Right.
I want to switch a job.
Okay.
Other than that,
Glad you're honest about it.
No, my LinkedIn bio says please find me on Twitter. That's it. Like I'm not active here.
That's where you can find him, folks, on Twitter. Follow him.
And book. I was reading a book recently, which was about Buddhism. So it's called The Truths in Buddhism, which talks about a lot of Buddhist tenets. It's fundamentally challenging a few things in which we look at life. It's a very highly philosophical book, but it's a good refresher from the everyday stuff that we keep reading.
Right. Akash?
I think the app which I like is Todoist, which is very well designed. I just love their design language and all. Book I recently read Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. She's a world poker champion, and she have written about how to take decisions and how you detach your decision from the outcomes and all those things. It's very interesting read. Helps you to like how to take decisions professionally or in your life as well. Movie I haven't watched anyone recently, but uh, Hera Fairy, I just go and watch it like whenever I want to. Like that helps you.
Have a laugh while you're being serious about life, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I just go and watch movies which I like. I don't have to use my brain most of the time. Yeah.
Great. Mega agrees. Mega's like, yeah, I don't want to use my brain when I watch movies. That's purely
That's for
entertainment.
entertainment. Oh,
Purely
what else?
Exactly, exactly.
All right, great. So, thank you for the questions as well. And I think it's time that we wrap up this panel discussion. So, folks, a big round of applause for our panelists today. We have spoken about a lot of things. We have been objective, we have been subjective, we have spoken about philosophy, but more importantly, we have all spoken about how we need to conduct this community that we are building. And I think that's the most important takeaway from this discussion. So, once again, thank you guys for joining me in conversation. Akash, thank you so much for joining us. And if you guys are all here, I'll take this moment to also just thank all of our viewers on YouTube for joining us for this event. Just love you guys help in closing this event for me. And because now we have reached towards the end of our event today, this meetup today, I want to thank all of you guys for taking out the time and spending it with us. I hope that you've had something to learn and something to take away with you today. And I think I hope that there has been a perspective shift. I mean, we've been talking to people who have been in this industry for long and have seen almost everything in it, right? And it's the best people that we can learn this stuff from. Once again, thank you so much for being with us today. Do follow us on all of our social media channels. Obviously, Geeky Ants you'll be up to date with all the future events that we'll be doing. We'll have more people here. We'd love to see all of you guys back for all the meetups that we do. We do a lot of meetups based on tech, on design, on all the newest things that are in and out of the technology space. So once again, thank you. Big news is that we have pizza, beer, coke waiting for you guys outside. So it's time to splurge and not be ashamed of it at all.
I just saw Akash doing this.
You should have been here, Akash. You should have been here. That's what I told you.
You should have told me about pizza and beer, man. I should have lied down. Come on.
Next time, tell him about pizza and beer, please, when we are disclosing the agenda.
That wasn't mentioned in the agenda, by the way.
Swiggy it, Akash. Swiggy it. Join us.
We will do.
Okay. Anyway, so all of the refresh. Yes.
Digvijay, how about a round of introduction from everybody sitting here so that if we meet there again, can at least explain that.
We should absolutely do that, but I think we'll do that offline. So once they just close with everything, then we'll do it, right? So we will definitely do that. So anyway, refreshments are here. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for joining us today. To guys, everybody who's joined us online, thank you so much for spending your time with us, and we will definitely see you next time. Thanks a lot. Take care and good night. All right, before we then, I guess we are going off. Thank you, Akash. Thanks. Before we leave.